The title of this video is An Autopsy of Mario Party Superstars. Autopsies are an examination done on a dead body in order to discover the cause of death. So just using that word makes the statement that the game is dead, and it is, but not for the reasons you might think. Mario Party Superstars was developed by ND Cube and released in October of 2021. It's the 12th mainline entry in the series, but if you're not familiar with the franchise, here's a brief explanation. They are party games where players control different characters from the Mario series, moving around a board trying to collect the most stars. The gameplay is divided into two parts, the board and the minigames. On the board side of things, players roll dice each turn that determine how many spaces their characters move. This on the surface appears to be mostly chance, but there's actually a fair amount of strategy and forward thinking that can but doesn't necessarily need to go into this stage of the game. Choosing routes unrelated to the star placement is a big one, and instead thinking about shops, event spaces, or special board-related gimmicks. Additionally, there are various items that players can collect and use, each providing some sort of benefit or hindrance to yourself and/or other players. Again, this side of the game is really as complex as you want it to be. Now, after each player has moved their character for the round, the game shifts to the minigame side. These are randomly chosen and can be free-for-all, duos, or a 3 versus 1. There's a lot of variety in the types of minigames and skills they require to win. Platforming, timing, button mashing, reflexes, memory, coordination, and just blind luck are all represented here. The winner or winners of the minigame will earn coins, and then the board phase begins again. Players try to win minigames in order to have an increased supply of coins, which is necessary in order to purchase stars or items on the board. This is the cycle of gameplay. Make decisions and move around the board, then compete in minigames to earn coins, which in turn creates more decisions for the board. There's a bit more to the board side of the game, different spaces players can land on being the big one. For example, some cause players to gain or lose small amounts of coins, some give out free items, and others summon Bowser. Most entries in the series make small changes that may or may not stick around, but this is the core format of the series. Mario Party Superstars, despite being the 12th game in the series, functions as a remake of the older entries rather than something putting forward new ideas. You're invited to a blast from parties past, the game's official website claims, and explains that the game is a collection of classic boards and minigames from throughout the series' history. This is what originally drew me to Superstars. While I missed the first game completely, I was the target age for the second, third, and fourth games. In particular, Mario Party 3 and 4 were both important games from my childhood, and I have fond memories of playing them with my friends and family, as I do with many Nintendo games from around that same time. I am not an expert on the series and I won't pretend to be. I haven't played every game in the series, and truth be told, I likely haven't even played half of them. Just as quickly as the series arrived on my radar, it left. I became a teenager who wanted an Xbox and Halo, so after the release of the 5th game in the series, I fell off the franchise. This was all important to say because many people's feelings about this game are wrapped up both in nostalgia but also wishes about what this game could be versus what it actually is. Many people, myself included, hoped that Mario Party Superstars would become a platform versus a one-time product, with more remade classic boards and minigames continuously being offered either as updates or as purchasable add-ons. A steady drip of nostalgia dopamine hits. This never happened, and I want to clearly state that it's unfair for fans to be upset about this. No promises or hints were ever made by the developers, and so the expectations for further content came from no one but the players themselves. This is not a video talking about the lack of updates or downloadable content. I won't present any suggestions for additional boards, minigames, or characters that should be added because despite having opinions on those, they would be entirely personal preference. Instead, this is an examination of what the bigger issues with the game are, and there are many. More boards and minigames might have provided a solution to Mario Party Superstars' problems in the short term, but they are a band-aid for the actual problems that the series has now. A sickness that has festered within it and unless checked will continue to kill each new entry as they release. Superstars' internal issues are the cause of death and are as follows. It's missing content, and it's poorly thought out in-game economics. While it's too late for Superstars, it's not too late for the inevitable next game in the series. The final portion of this video will look at how a potential solution to these issues doesn't even have to come specifically from the developers, but rather from the community. Giving players the reins with increased and in-depth customization would allow for them to come up with their own fixes while also only requiring a crumb of additional work from the developers. I think it bears mentioning that Mario Party Superstars does do some things well. The visual design of the series has never been better, and the addictive nature the series is known for when playing with friends is on display in full force. I want to be very clear, though, that me saying these things does not give Nintendo an out here, or somehow balance the scales for the issues that are present. People are capable of enjoying something while also still acknowledging it to be a subpar product. I also want to be equally clear that the point of this video is not to shit on the game, because I have had fun playing it. However, as with most autopsies, a little shit is unavoidable, so let's roll up our sleeves and get into it. I said that this video would not be focused on the lack of add-ons and updates, and that's true. Despite that, however, make no mistake that Superstars is missing base-level content. Content that has become standard within the series. It doesn't have a single-player story mode, no way to create teams for rounds, and only 5 boards. They are beautifully recreated, but there's still only 5 of them. The original 3 games in the series, the games that Superstars draws the most inspiration from, had 8, 6, and 6 maps respectively. Let that soak in. The game that is meant to remake the older entries has less playable boards than them. This matters because these stages are what players will be staring at for 3/4 of the game. The unlockables in the game are also lacking, as outside of the stickers, it's only history and other readable codexes. Mario Party Superstars is supposed to be a celebration of what many people consider the best games in the series, but that celebration barely goes below the surface anywhere that actually matters. And with less content overall in the package, it makes the other core design issue stand out even more glaringly. The biggest issue Mario Party Superstars has is with its in-game economy, the sheer amount of coins and the balance of items. These two issues are deeply intertwined, as you might imagine. The fundamental difference here in Superstars to the older games in the series is the addition and oversaturation of ways to get coins. In the older games, you received 10 coins from winning a minigame and 3 coins from landing on a blue space on the board. There were additional special cases like using a boo to steal coins from other players or landing on a battle or chance space, but those were far rarer and typically only happened because of the board decision-making process. For example, choosing to go the route with the boo stop in order to steal coins from the person closest to the star. There were also rare coin-based minigames where it was a game specifically built around the idea of collecting coins, and at the end each player would earn exactly what they did in the minigame. I don't have a problem with any of these because they don't feel like options that players can reliably count on when playing. They are bonuses or require the player to be in the right place at the right time in order to capitalize on. They also contribute to the excitement and memorableness of a game because of this unreliableness. Superstars retains all of these options and provides even more. For much of the series, it used to be the winner of the minigame was typically the only one to receive coins, but now second and third place do as well. Pity coins are what they are given, and even I disagree with this mechanic despite being a liberal snowflake. Now, every 5 turns in-game is a double earning minigame, and God help you if a coin-based minigame gets chosen for that round. It can be possible to earn 30, 40, or even 50 coins from a single minigame. These decisions by themselves, while still not ideal, aren't actually big enough to create the coin economy issue I mentioned. It only appears because of the other problem, the addition of a new board space, the lucky spaces. When landed on, these spaces give the player either a free item or some amount of coins, between 7 and 15. And you might be thinking, okay, cool, these special spaces have a chance of giving a large number of coins, but does this really fundamentally change the game's economy? The answer is yes, and it's due to how many of these lucky spaces there are. Let's look at the Horrorland board. As it is in Mario Party Superstars, it has 93 spaces total. 33 of them are blue spaces, 8 are red, 7 happening, 7 item, 4 are Bowser, 4 verses, 2 chance time, 3 are spaces for the bank, and finally all of the remaining spaces are lucky spaces. Want to know how many? This could even be a game. If you want, pause the video and write a comment guessing how many lucky spaces are on the Horrorland map. I'll give you a second. 25. 25 spaces on the board are lucky spaces. That amounts to 27% of the total spaces on the board. This is second only to blue spaces, which is 35%. The average number of spaces between two lucky spaces is just 4. 4 spaces. I want to take this a bit further actually, because it isn't just coins that are the problem, but also the amount of items. Grouping lucky and item spaces together brings their total percentage up to 35%, now equal to blue spaces. I think this is especially relevant because these are the two problems with the economy, although it's actually hard to tell if the items themselves are broken as well, or if it just appears that way because of the surplus of coins. I'm inclined to believe that the coins are the bigger issue because, as we'll see in a bit, the number of item spaces has remained largely consistent, which means they themselves aren't the problem. So if 35% of the board is blue spaces and another 35% are lucky and item spaces, then the remaining 30% contains everything else. All of those other spaces. This might seem like a bad thing, but it's actually a good thing in my opinion. This is why those spaces feel exciting to land on, because they each represent a small percentage of the board. They're special. This same breakdown is roughly what we see from each of the other maps as well. Usually about a third of the spaces will be blue spaces, about a third will be lucky and item spaces, and the final third is everything else. The exception to this is Peach's birthday cake, which is unique in its setup compared to the other 4 maps. Its star location never changes, it features no item spaces at all, it features no boo shop, and it's the only map where the everything else category is a larger percentage than the other groups. This is largely because of its many happening spaces, which are centered to the map's gimmick of planting piranha plant seeds and using them to steal coins and stars from the other players. I would argue that this small percentage of lucky spaces and no item spaces at all is actually why this board is one of my 2 favorites to play in Superstars. It's interesting even because despite less ways to accumulate coins, the map's economy doesn't feel like it. The gimmick with the piranha plants is fueled by coins, and it always feels like you have enough to buy their seeds as well as items at the item shop without being excessive. The fact that roughly a third of the spaces on most of the maps are just blindly rewarding players with larger amounts of coins or items is the problem here. To drive this point home, let's look at the original Horrorland for comparison. Also, I want to say that I understand having percentages and this many numbers in a video dedicated to a party game is probably a bit silly, and it is, but I think it's important for people to actually understand why Superstar has these problems. I'm not going to go through each of the numbers like I did previously, but I am showing a side-by-side comparison of the original Horrorland map and the Superstars remaster if you feel the need to pause and confirm for yourself. In the original version of this map, 63% of the spaces were blue, only 6% were lucky and item spaces, and 30% were all of the other spaces. The original maps and games didn't have the broken coin economy or the problem with lucky spaces because lucky spaces didn't exist then. At some point during development, ND Cube decided to take a little under half of what were originally blue spaces and convert them into lucky spaces. While I can't say what their reason for doing so was, I can say that it was not successful. The game already presents an obvious solution to them as well, having the lucky spaces disappear and revert back to regular blue ones once they've been landed on. This is something that the Versus spaces already do. It could even somewhat justify the initially high percentage of lucky spaces if it was temporary, while also making them feel, I don't know, lucky. So, coins and lucky spaces are the bigger issue, but item shops, prices, locations, and item availability all are poorly balanced as well, or at least feel like it. As I said earlier, it's hard to determine if items are actually fairly priced because you're shitting coins. What I can say is that the availability of chomp calls and golden pipes feels excessive at best. Having a round of everyone using a chomp call to move the star is funny once or twice, but not every other round. Constantly getting items devalues them and furthermore doesn't meaningfully add to gameplay. It makes decisions less thoughtful, and why even bother with shops if 25% of the spaces on a board have a chance of giving a random item for free? As I'm sure you can tell, this all particularly bothers me because while I enjoy the minigames, I personally find much more enjoyment from the decision-making process on the board. The minigames would be like checkers, whereas the board is chess. That's not to say chess is better than checkers or that the board side of the game is better than the minigames. There's just a lot more going on the board side. It's the long game versus the short game. With all of this in mind, the future of this series is not through sheer numbers of minigames or content crafted by the developers themselves, in my opinion, but instead through customization. If this game had extensive customization features, it would essentially balance or unbalance itself as much as players want, and it would generate new content, maybe not in the traditional sense of new maps, but it would allow players to make new modes or game styles of their own choosing. If you need an example, there are many videos on YouTube of people playing a most stars lose concept of the game. In it, as you can probably guess from the name, the goal is to have as few stars as possible. Players aren't allowed to turn down purchasing stars if they have the money when they pass by, and this single variation flips the whole game on its head. While the developers do allow the very basics of customization, such as giving handicap starting stars or the selection of different genres of minigames, this needs to be deepened. While I would love to be able to customize star locations, individual spaces on the board, or shop prices, there are two basic customization features that are still not in the series but should be: minigame playlists and item switches. The developers included curated playlists themselves, but I don't understand why players aren't allowed to create their own. While most of Superstar's minigames are enjoyable, not all of them are, and there should be an option to remove individual minigames like Piranha's Pursuit, for example, or even whole genres like the coin collecting minigames. Looking through the list of games as I write this script, there are several that I forgot were even in the game because the pool is so full. Ice Rink, Risk, and Speed Hockey come to mind here. It also blows my mind that an item switch has yet to be included. It's something that the Super Smash Bros. Series has had since its first entry in 1999. The lack of being able to turn certain items on or off, I consider especially unacceptable and lazy on the part of the developers. Golden pipes and chomp calls on Woody Woods wouldn't be an issue if I could just turn them off. Mario Party Superstars appears to want to be a loving celebration of the origins of the franchise, but at the same time, the developers seem conflicted about that celebration. The signs of love are there, but then there's all of the signs of uninterest or just laziness, less content and options than many previous entries in the series. You're invited to a blast from parties past, the website reads, so this should be the updated version you want everyone to buy, and if you actually want to celebrate this series, then put in the effort and make it count. Otherwise, I suspect more and more people will be passing on the party the next go around. As always, thanks for watching, and if you got some value out of the video, I'd appreciate a like, subscribe, or comment. I said earlier in the video that I didn't want to get into what maps I thought should have been included or at least added to Superstars because it didn't seem appropriate for the type of video this is. However, here in the outro, I'll give my thoughts. Strictly looking at Mario Party 3, since it is currently only represented with one board, my first choice would have been Spiny Desert. The mechanic of there being 2 stars, but only one of them being real and the other being a mirage, I remember enjoying and would have been a unique mechanic that added to the current selection of maps. Additionally, the other maps in 3 feel too similar to ones already present in Superstars. Creepy Cavern feels like Yoshi's Tropical Island, with the 2 separate loops being connected by a few junctions. Both Chilly Waters and Waluigi's Island feel like Spaceland, with a central location event similar to the Bowser laser. And to be honest, I don't remember Deep Bloober Sea at all from my time playing as a kid, so it can't be that interesting. And yeah, the next video will be on Alan Wake 2.